Reactor online. Sensors online. Weapons online. All systems nominal.
Hello everyone, Carrie here with the Unicorn Company podcast. While I usually talk about the news, I'm pre-recording the audio for this about 6 weeks before it's released because of some oral surgery I've had, and I needed to allow for some recovery time. So there isn't any news today. My main subject is about the premium miniatures from Catalyst Game Labs, and then I will be covering one that has been featured as a premium miniature in our MechTech segment, the Black Knight. If you want to get Battletech news and mini reviews, remember to follow us on your podcast distribution network of choice, or if you are listening on YouTube, like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to keep up to date on new videos and podcasts. Alright, let's get into this. So I ran into an interesting thread in our Battletech that has done a review of the Battlemaster Premium Miniature from Catalyst Game Labs. In the comments on the review, quite a few people pointed out the quality of the premiums, and if you looked at the reviews I've done, I've always pointed out the quality issues which seem to plague the premium minis, be it with the extra wide shoulders on some, which we have seen on every Innersphere Premium mech, to the problems with the legs on a number of the mechs. This doesn't even cover the oddballs out there like the Tiny Rifleman, the Lairline Hammerhead, or the Beats by Dre Phoenix Hawk. The funny thing about the premium minis is that it wasn't always like this. When the premium minis entered production, it was through a small startup company called Creative Juggernaut. Creative Juggernaut, or CJ from here on, is a small company established by Blaine Pardoe and Brent Evans. They were part of the build-up to the premium minis being released, and were the company that originally produced the Black Knight Clanbuster and the Ryokan TC Premium mechs. CJ used a cast resin technique not too dissimilar to what you usually see with small boutique miniature companies. As far as quality, they weren't bad. They did have some miscast issues that were definitely giving them some problems. As proof of this, at the first Southern Assault, they provided baggies of miscast resin parts. To their credit, though, they were good on quality control, and the minis were to scale with the Catalyst plastic minis. Eventually, CJ and Catalyst parted ways. The relationship between them ended well before the whole incident involving Blaine and Catalyst's decision not to continue using him for writing work, if my memory serves me correct, and I feel that it was due to a few factors, one of which being that neither CJ nor CGL could predict the popularity of the premium miniatures on their release. When the premiums were first released, they would sell out as soon as they were back in stock. This kind of thing is both a blessing and a curse, as it means that you have something popular that people want. It also means that you're going to have lost sales due to people who constantly see it out of stock, then they try to buy it, and eventually they give up out of frustration. There is an example of this kind of thing in the past with another game, X-Wing, where the game took off to a level not seen before by Fantasy Flight Games, and they struggled with the demand for the miniatures for the X-Wing miniatures game at first, where you ended up with a number of scalpers in the situation with X-Wing. With the rise of 3D printers, you actually saw a boom in the 3D printing mini market when CGL was having trouble keeping up with the premium minis. That is something I think deserves its own conversation, though. So let's continue on the topic of the premiums. While I don't have an internal source on this in particular, I can look at the situation and guess that given the problems with keeping the minis in stock, and possibly also due to the fact that CJ had another game which may have been taking focus away from the production of the premium minis, Catalyst would have to find a new partner for the premiums. The next premium mini we would get would be from another company. This time Catalyst had turned to Monster Fight Club. Monster Fight Club makes miniatures for several other games outside of the premium miniatures, including their own Cyberpunk Red Combat Zone, which is what I mostly know them for aside from the premium minis. I've actually played Cyberpunk Red enough times to have a starter set of or a starter gang, the Danger Gals, and they are very well done with a pretty standard amount of cleanup needed, but nothing excessive. They're well detailed, come with several options when it comes to small things like heads for each member of a gang or crew, and all of it is very well proportioned. Naturally, you would expect that with the level of detail and quality in 28mm CO cast that Monster Fight Club can achieve with their Cyberpunk Red Minis, that something like a mech at 1/265th scale, which is roughly the same size as a 28mm person-sized miniature with a bit more bulk, would be a walk in the park, especially given the lack of organic lines you find with like a cat girl in a trench coat carrying a bazooka. Apparently, though, the level of detail required for mechs, much less the ability to scale them properly, is something that Monster Fight Club struggles with. I mean, this may be a bit harsh, though we have had some egregious examples like the Hammerhead with the mold lines or print lines in the torso, which were so bad that they included a new torso for it with the Eris, or the Rifleman, which is so small it could have doubled as the first generation medium weight rifleman, the Phoenix Hawk with the massive headphone antenna in what looks like an attempt to have not to sculpt and cast a separate head by connecting it to the jump jets, and a Battlemaster which definitely looks like it has skipped leg day. This doesn't even begin to cover the weird obsession with making all the shoulder sockets and shoulder balls on the arms the same size for some crazy concept of interchangeability. Okay, I know it probably sounds like I'm bitching and moaning about the premiums like a Capellan Chancellor at a Davian wedding. I do have some suggestions though, and I hope someone from Catalyst is listening because I really want y'all to be successful here. So let's talk solutions. The first thing we need is some better quality control. I don't know who exactly the minis go through in the QC process, or even how many people are involved in the process on Catalyst's end of things. Whatever the process is, though, it definitely needs an overhaul. I also have to question whether you are getting 3D printed prototypes or actual production proofs before you approve Monster Fight Club to go into production. The reason I have to ask this is that I can see the possibility of Monster Fight Club presenting a printed prototype which doesn't include all the shortcuts that they have to add to make it work with so few parts as they tend to use for each mech. Yes, I know they give you multiple arms and legs, but it seems nothing can be a part that you have to add to the torso, and this leads to some egregious issues. Next, either Catalyst or Monster Fight Club, whichever party is responsible for it, needs to abandon the interchangeable ball socket arm system. I get it. It gives you an ability to sort of make some Franken mechs. It also gives you more posability when you're building the miniature. This whole thing messes up the proportions of the mech, giving them extra wide shoulders that they just don't normally have. And this leads to the legs looking too small when compared to the top of the mech, even if the legs are proportioned correctly. It is also affecting more iconic machines such as the Battlemaster, Wolverine, and Phoenix Hawk, while the clan mechs don't tend to suffer from this due to the way they're designed. The second to last thing I would recommend to fix issues with the premium miniatures is variants and unique mechs. I know the Star League Force Packs and Essentials have explored this idea with Prometheus, Yenlo Wang, and the Kerensky Orion. And as a note to anyone who is about to correct me in the comments, the other two pre-paints are standard mech configurations, and that is a slightly different Orion. I believe that doing unique and variants are important for the line, as when the premium started out, we got the Black Knight Clampbuster and Ryokan TC. We also got the Mad Cat TC and Phelan's Wolfhound 2C. I think those were under Monster Fight Club, actually. The premiums have also historically given us designs which hadn't seen plastic or metal releases yet, such as the Hammerhead and Eris. The premiums were a way to get mechs which weren't out in any form yet, or even to get those odd and interesting machines that you wouldn't likely see in a Force Pack due to how rare they are. Now we have Monster Fight Club giving us mechs that are already in production, that blindly mirror the arm weapons for the most part, while taking shortcuts with the casting process so they don't have to produce a separate head or missile launcher. At the same time, I can get direct analogs of these chassis that often make two different variants of a mech from Iron Wind Metals while being cast at a quality and detail level that exceeds what we get from Monster Fight Club for only a few dollars more. I honestly think that this is one of the failings of Monster Fight Club and the premium miniatures. When it was unique mechs, it felt like the premium line had a purpose. And now, many of them are the same base model that you can get in a Force Pack, getting 3 to 4 additional minis for a cost per mech that is a fraction of what you paid for that premium. Look, I understand there may be some contractual obligation between CGL and Monster Fight Club. Hell, for all I know, part of that is an agreement that Monster Fight Club only does standard variants of mechs, or that all of the minis must consist of arms, hip, torso, and legs, thus not allowing for certain parts and forcing some of the shortcuts we have seen so far. If this is not the case, though, if whoever is handling the premiums at Catalyst can dictate which minis are being made and is capable of giving critique and design input on the minis before they go into production, then give us new and unique minis through this line. There are plenty of mechs and variants out there that are popular and don't have a mini in the current design style in plastic or metal. Okay, so, that pretty much says all that I can really say about this, and I'm going to shift gears here. I just hope that the right people are listening. Now, like I said, I want to shift gears, and I want to talk about something I like, which is mechs themselves, and I want to cover a mech in our Mech Tech segment that has a premium miniature. Before I do, I want to remind you that you can support Unicorn Company on Patreon at patreon.com/unicorncompany, or if you're listening on YouTube, you can become a channel member. Alright, in our Mech Tech segment, sponsored by FortressMiniaturesandGames.com, we are looking at the Black Knight. The Black Knight is an interesting mech that has seen service in one form or another since 2578. The Black Knight was developed by Kong Interstellar for the Starleague Defense Forces as a command mech for frontline units. While originally conceived as a command mech, the Black Knight would find itself pushed into the role of being a mid-range brawler for much of its existence, and supplanted in the command role by mechs like the Marauder in 2612, Battlemaster in 2633, and the Atlas in 2755. The Black Knight would find itself thrust into the chaos of the Reunification War after its development. It saw service across various fronts of the Starleague's war to subjugate the Periphery. While it was surpassed by others in its intended role, the Black Knight would receive the royal treatment in 2751, the same year as the death of First Lord Ian Cameron. This upgraded Black Knight would, much like the original, see its baptism by fire in the Periphery after the Torrens kicked off things with the new Vandenberg Uprising of 2765. The Black Knight, in both the standard and upgraded forms, served the SLDF under Kerensky as they tried to quell the rebellions in the Periphery, and eventually, after the coup on Terra by Stefano Maris, would serve as a reliable and valuable part of the campaign to capture the Rimworld's Republic, and then eventually the campaign to liberate the Terran hegemony. The Black Knight was an invaluable mech in SLDF service during the campaign to liberate Terra, as its lack of dependence on ammunition-based weapons allowed it to continue operations at its full potential, while other heavy mechs such as the Orion and even the Marauder would often find themselves operating with partial ammunition loads for what ballistic weapons they had, causing them to have to reserve some of their firepower, while Black Knight pilots were only limited by the heat their weapons generated. After the liberation of Terra and Kerensky's exodus, Kong Interstellar would continue production of the Black Knight until their destruction, or the destruction of their facilities, on Connaught in 2802. While Kong would begin production again in 2809, the mech which would come out of their facilities would do so in limited numbers and a shadow of what the Black Knight had originally been. With the destruction of their facilities, the Black Knights, which were built to Starleague specifications, began to disappear due to a lack of spare parts for their advanced weapons, equipment, and structure, and the machine itself. Even with Kong producing a downgraded version, would become increasingly rare on the battlefields of the Succession Wars. Even with the destruction of the original lines, the Black Knight did serve on the battlefields of the Succession Wars in a downgraded form, using standard weapons, equipment, and a standard structure, as the materials to repair and replace endo-steel structures became impossible to get your hands on. The more advanced Black Knight was thought lost to time and the ravages of war, until an event changed the course of history as we knew it. In the latter half of the 31st century, an invading force would threaten the Inner Sphere from the Corward periphery. These invaders called themselves the Clans. At first, they seemed like an unstoppable force as they carved their way through the Federated Commonwealth, Free Roslalag Republic, and Draconis Combine like a warmongering Julia Childs cutting up a turkey with an electric carving knife. Unbeknownst to the successor states, the clans were being assisted by Comstar, who would lock down communications on conquered worlds, assist in administering those worlds, and give the clans intelligence on targets in their path. Comstar would have likely continued this assistance, as they saw the clans as a hammer with which they could shatter the great houses and reconstruct the Star League in their own image. This spirit of cooperation would end abruptly when the final target of the invasion forces was revealed: the homeworld of humanity, Terra, and the re-establish of a Star League under clan rule. This revelation would spur Comstar to turn the world of Tukiad into the shoal on which the tsunami of the clan invasion would be broken. A tool in the arsenal of Comstar would be an upgraded Black Knight, which would become one of the most well-known variants of the mech, the Clanbuster Black Knight. This variant of the Black Knight would be very different from its predecessors, with a focus on close-range combat. The Clanbuster would feature a weapon anathema to the clan way of combat itself: a sword, or a sword-shaped hatchet as it were. The Clanbuster would, much like the variants that had come before it, face deployment in combat very quickly, especially since the Clanbuster was designed specifically to combat the clans. Clanbuster would ultimately only see deployment in the ranks of Comstar and the Word of Blake, and never saw widespread use throughout the Inner Sphere. The Black Knight would see some upgrades and various variants throughout the years following the clan invasion, and the Word of Blake's latter fratricidal war, which eventually spilled over into the entirety of the Inner Sphere. The next radical change to the Black Knight would not be seen until near the end of the 31st century in 3091, and from an unlikely source: Robinson's Standard Battle Works in the Federated Suns. The new Black Knight would abandon the curved lines of the original and lean into a more angular look that would give this iteration of the mech a distinct look that makes it instantly recognizable. Even with this new look, Robinson held true to the spirit of the original as they built their new Black Knight with an all-energy weapons loadout. The Black Knight, even with its new design, quickly found itself in the midst of combat as tensions were escalating between the Federated Suns and Draconis Combine, which eventually erupted into open war. The Black Knight often found itself facing off in duels with Draconis Combine machines such as the Hatamoto Chi, and Robinson, seeing an opportunity to make money hand over fist with the success of the mech, cranked out as many variants as they possibly could, sometimes even incorporating clan weapons and equipment for increased effectiveness as hostilities continued. Because of these hostilities and the high production rate of the mech, the Black Knight would also find itself in limited service to the Combine through capture and battlefield salvage. Looking at the Black Knight as a platform, it has definitely changed and evolved through the years, and I think it is important for us to take a look at some of the key variants of the machine. First, we have the mech that started it all, the BL-6 KNT Black Knight. The first of many versions which would see service, the BL-6 is 75 tons and built on a Technocron 1L Endosteel chassis and powered by the venerable Vlar 300 fusion engine, which would allow it to travel at speeds of up to 64 kilometers per hour. For protection, the Black Knight would carry 13 tons of Valiant lamellar armor, and which gained a reputation throughout the Inner Sphere for its reliability, and it also carries an array of energy weapons, with its primary weapons consisting of an arm-mounted particle projection cannon in its right arm and a large laser in each side torso. The Black Knight carries 4 medium lasers and a head-mounted small laser as secondary weapons, and also carries a Beagle active probe to help it find hidden units which may be laying in wait to ambush it or its lancemates. The BL-6 has a potentially powerful arsenal, though its effectiveness is limited by the use of 20 single heat sinks to dissipate the heat load generated by its vast energy weapons arsenal. The Royal Black Knight, developed in 2751, would seek to improve on the original by increasing its accuracy and its heat dissipation capabilities. In doing this, much of the mech would remain unchanged from the standard Black Knight, with the mech receiving 16 double heat sinks, giving it just over 50% more heat dissipation. The Royal Black Knight would improve its arsenal by replacing the standard PPC with an extended range particle projection cannon, giving the mech a longer reach on the battlefield. For close-in work, the Black Knight replaces its standard large lasers with a pair of highly accurate large pulse lasers, which sacrifice some range for increased damage and accuracy. This variant of the Black Knight definitely improves its effectiveness and increases its heat efficiency. While the ERPPC does give it increased range, the additional heat load does somewhat counter that increased heat dissipation from the double heat sinks. The biggest upgrade here, though, in my opinion, are the large pulse lasers, which turn the Black Knight into a lethal knife fighter. The next Black Knight we'll look at is the one used throughout the Succession Wars. There's not a lot to talk about with it, but we're going to look at it here. The BL-7 Black Knight uses the weapons loadout of the BL-6 with the particle projection cannon, large lasers, and medium lasers. In fact, it maintains the 20 heat sinks of the original. In order to do this, the BL-7 model sacrifices 3 tons of armor and its advanced Beagle active probe of the Starlink predecessors. While under-armored compared to previous variants, it was a necessary sacrifice as the ability to produce the advanced Endosteel chassis was lost to time, and still puts it on par with many of its Succession War counterparts, such as the MAD-3R Marauder and the WHM-6R Warhammer. The Black Knight, which would arguably become the most well-known and would help to break the back of the clans on Tukid, was the BL-9 KNT, also known as the Clanbuster Black Knight. This model of the Black Knight was built on surviving Star League examples of the mech in the possession of Comstar since Kerensky's Exodus. In order to facilitate a refit of the Black Knight to combat the clans, the BL-9 removed the standard VLAR 300 and replaces it with an extra light version of the engine. While the extra light engine reduces the survivability of the mech, it does free up a large amount of tonnage to refit the mech, and the freed tonnage is used very well. The BL-9 increases the mech's armor protection by half a ton and swaps the 20 single heat sinks for 15 double heat sinks. The majority of the mech's arsenal has been refit, starting with an extended range PPC in the right arm, with a medium pulse laser in the same arm. The mech does retain the large lasers in each side torso and swaps the medium lasers for medium pulse lasers. The left arm carries a medium pulse laser, and a large pulse laser is mounted in the mech's center torso. The most radical change in the weapons payload is the sword-shaped hatchet in the Black Knight's left arm. This weapon is designed to cleave through enemy armor, doing as much damage as a Gauss rifle or a Clan extended range PPC. While the Clanbuster Black Knight served with distinction during the Battle of Tukid, the BL-9 would find itself serving exclusively with Comstar and its fanatical splinter faction, the Word of Blake, until the demise of the Word and demilitarization of Comstar. The last variant we're looking at is the reimagined Black Knight that would see the Federated Suns into the 32nd century. This model of the Black Knight would be the first advanced model built from the ground up since the loss of Kong Interstellar's advanced production facilities almost 200 years prior. The BLK NT-2Y Black Knight would be built on a Technicron revised NT Endo composite chassis and will be clad in 13.5 tons of Valiant Lemeller armor. This new Black Knight took a cue from the Clanbuster model and uses a VLAR 300 extra light engine to give it as much usable tonnage as possible. This model of the mech would carry a wide array of energy weapons with a particle projection cannon in its left arm, along with a large laser and medium laser. In its right arm, it carries a large laser and medium laser with a shield for added protection at the cost of speed. Finally, the Black Knight has a medium laser in each side torso. This configuration gives the Black Knight a greater field of fire with its primary weapons by moving the large lasers to the arms. What truly sets this iteration of the mech apart, though, is its extensive suite of advanced electronics. Among these are a Beagle active probe, a Guardian ECM suite, and most importantly a C3 slave computer to allow it to share targeting data with other units in a C3 network, and an advanced targeting computer which is linked to all of the weapons and gives even a green mech warrior the ability to handle the weapons like a more seasoned mech warrior. The Black Knight's accurate and deadly weapons array is cooled by 15 double heat sinks, making it quite heat efficient even for an all-energy design. In the years following its initial deployment, this new version of the Black Knight would find widespread use in the Federated Suns and is highly valued because of its lack of ammunition dependency, especially as the war with the Combine turned increasingly sour. The Black Knight is a mech with a long and storied history. It almost strikes me as a Cincinnatus of mechs, as each time a war had ended and it seemed time had passed the design by, it would soon find itself receiving upgrades and being deployed into the next conflict. Starting out as a command mech to lead companies of Star League mechs, the Black Knight would evolve over time to serve the needs of each of the states it found itself in service to. It would go from command mech and eventually become a brawler, then a knife fighter, and once again a powerful brawler. Among different generations, it has been known as a symbol of oppression by the periphery, a stalwart and determined soldier during the liberation of Terra, the machine that broke the clans on Tukiad, and now finally a bulwark against the Dragon as a Draconis Combine rampaged through the Federated Suns and has finally been pushed back. The Black Knight has been many things to many people, but to those who have had the honor of piloting one, it is a reliable, powerful mech that more often than not will bring you home to fight another day, and hopefully survive. Now, before we wrap up, as is tradition, I want to take a look at the variants of the Black Knight we've discussed here today in Alpha Strike. We start with the BL6 KNT Black Knight. The BL6 is a battle mech, size 3 with a TMM of 1 and movement of 8 inches. It is a 39-point brawler and has decent firepower of 3 at short and medium with 1 at long and 2 overheat damage. The BL6 has armor of 7 and structure of 6 with specials of energy, probe, and recon. The royal upgrade of the mech, the BL6B KNT Black Knight, is a battle mech size 3 with a TMM of 1, movement of 8 inches. It is also a brawler at 42 points. The Royal Black Knight has firepower of 4 at short and medium ranges and 1 at long with an overheat of 1, and has 7 armor and 6 structure with specials of energy, probe, and recon. These mechs are very similar, and the Royal variant does pay a premium for not having one of the damage it is capable of doing as overheat. Overall, though, the investment in points is worth it in my opinion, as the Royal version of the mech is capable of doing more consistent damage over the course of a battle. The next iteration we're looking at is the BL7 KNT Black Knight. This is the one that saw the downgrades of the Succession War. The BL7 is a battle mech size 3 with a TMM of 1 and movement of 8. It is once again a brawler and has the low cost of 34 points. It does 3 damage at short and medium ranges and 1 at long with 2 overheat. It does have 6 armor and 6 structure, making it slightly less survivable than the previous variants, and only has a special of energy. Even with the loss of 3 tons of armor in Classic, in Alpha Strike the loss of armor isn't felt as much. And the BL7 is a viable replacement for the BL6 when playing Alpha Strike, with a small loss of combat effectiveness and the loss of the probe and recon abilities, which will affect you more in scenarios where you find yourself needing them or wanting them to achieve your objectives. We now find ourselves at the Clanbuster variant of the Black Knight, the BL9 KNT. The Clanbuster Black Knight comes in at 39 points and is once again a brawler. It is a battle mech size 4 with a TMM of 1 and movement of 8 inches. It can do as much damage as the Royal variant with 4 at short and medium and 1 at long, and surpasses the Royal with the ability to overheat for 3 damage. The Clanbuster has armor of 7 and structure of 3 due to its XL engine. It does have the specials of energy and melee, which makes it a powerful close combatant, especially in games with multiple attack rolls, as the damage from a melee attack causes all of its damage on one roll as opposed to the chance with missing from weapon attacks with multiple rolls. It also has the advantage of being unaffected by heat like weapons attacks, allowing the Clanbuster to overheat on one turn, then strike with its sword to cause massive damage to an opponent while it cools down. The last variant we're looking at is the BLK-NT2Y. This version of the Black Knight is Juggernaut, and it has a cost of 46 points. The 2Y Black Knight is a battle mech size 3 with a TMO of 1 and movement of 6. It does 5 damage at short, 4 at medium, and 2 at long with 1 overheat. For protection, it has armor of 7 and structure of 3 with specials of C3 Slave, ECM, Energy, Melee, Mobile Headquarters 1, Probe, Recon, and Shield. The armored structure is a bit misleading on the new Black Knight, as the shield reduces damage to the mech in its front arc from non-indirect attacks, making its armor more effective by reducing the amount of damage it takes each turn. I could have just said direct attacks. Anyway, and if it does reach close enough, it can essentially bash an enemy with the shield. Well, that's all I have for the podcast today. I want to thank all of my patrons as well as my channel members on YouTube. You all help to make this possible. Also, to reiterate my feelings on the premium mechs, you will find links to as many of the Ironwind Metals mechs that I can find in the links in the description on the YouTube channel. All that said, stay safe out there, Mech Warriors. This is Kerry, signing off. I want to thank all of our patrons, channel members, and our sponsor for supporting the channel. Our patrons, first we have Captain Sarah, then our lieutenants, Boy in a Box and Nathan. We then have our sergeants, BZ Archer, Faz, and Steven. Then our cadets, Dominic, NB Kaiju, Housemaster Poding, Jamie and Scott. Then we have our wonderful channel member, Miss J. And finally, our sponsor and Mercenary Review and Bonding Commission liaison, Fortress Miniatures and Games.